What's up, guys? Megan, thank you and welcome to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
No problem at all. You're coming on by popular demand because I'm always asking our family of True Sports, and I kept hearing about Dr. Megsy, and I'm like, what the hell is Dr. Megsy? So I did some research, and it turns out you will be an awesome guest. I have no doubt. So just as way of background, Megan, tell us about what you're doing today and what your day to day looks like.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so humbling. I didn't know that was how you asked me to come on. And it's so funny because my name is Megan, but on Instagram my handle is Megsy. And I was telling you right before we started recording, like no one has ever called me Megsy before, but now there's literally people that think my name is Megsy. So it's Megan. Hi, I'm Megan. So currently I am a physical therapist and also a strength and conditioning coach. I have my own business and I work a combination of in-person cash-based physical therapy. I work out of a gym. I also see clients all over the world in a virtual space. And then I also have a group training program that I recently started and I'm absolutely loving. So I'm excited to talk about all those things.
Awesome. So, early shout out to your group training. Tell us what it is, what makes it unique, and how we can find that.
Yeah, so it is called Team Form and Function. The background behind it is, well, essentially, I didn't really know that I could do that. But when I was in school, I was doing a little bit of one-on-one coaching on the side, and I realized like during clinicals, I wasn't going to have the mental capacity to do that. So I started writing these like 12-week programs and then, just selling them for like a lower price than what I would do for my one-on-one coaching. And then learned that I could actually do that in like a subscription model where it's like an ongoing thing and I can actually interact with people more. And the reason that I started it is because I was a coach before I was a physical therapist. And honestly, I feel like there's such fine line between, obviously doing physical therapy, doing rehab is just training in the presence of an injury, in my opinion. So when it comes to strength and conditioning, I think we can do so much just to have people moving in such a way that actually makes them more resilient and feel good in their body. Because I think a lot of people get into exercise because they feel like they have to, or maybe they were an athlete previously and they don't really know what they're doing anymore. Or they're just in it for like aesthetics and their body like hurts and they don't know why. So I like to combine all those things and just make things a little bit, in my opinion, more sustainable.
Yeah,
Um,
I love the way you put that. Training in the presence of an injury, because what that does is it colors the physical therapist as a strength coach that has an understanding in pathophysiology, and I think that makes for an awesome summation of what sports physical therapy is. You have to be an awesome strength and conditioning coach, or at least have that background, certifications, maybe not, but understand the pathophysiology and still push your athlete to make gains, whether it be to overcome the injury or work around the injury, depending on the type of injury. So I love the way you put that. So when I started True Sports about 10 years ago, there really wasn't this model of I'm just gonna throw a table in a gym and call that my PT practice. Now it is pervasive. It's everywhere. So what makes working with Dr. Megan unique compared to all the other guys that are popping tables in gyms?
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, I feel like what makes me unique is that I don't want to say I'm old, but I took kind of like a non-traditional route to become a physical therapist. And I feel honestly, I've had some really amazing mentors in my time, both as an athletic trainer, as a strength coach. I've also done other people's programming that I think are really skilled in the industry. Katie St. Clair, shout out to her. Are you familiar with her?
Yes, she's a stud.
Okay. Yeah, she is an absolute stud. She's not a physical therapist. I don't know if you could have her on here, but she honestly taught me more in like
Megan,
her
I make the rules
course.
here. I can have
Okay,
anyone
yeah,
on here.
have her on
Okay.
if you haven't. Have her
Okay.
on. She's absolutely just a genius. But I think outside the box. And I think the fact that I have worked with people and I feel I have a good set of communication skills in order to like cue someone and get them to do what they weren't able to do before. So I would say that's what makes me unique is I just kind of think outside the box. I mean, if anyone has seen my Instagram, uh, I'm always tinkering with things, but then that speaking of that, like obviously the basics are what are going to ultimately be the best for like hypertrophy and strength and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes in order to get someone move better, we have to reverse engineer the basics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think you do a great job of thinking outside the box. I love your Instagram feed. Give me the handle so everyone knows to pop on there while they're listening to this.
Thank you. It's dr.megsy.dpt.
Okay, dr.megsy.dpt. Check her out because it's awesome. I learned a ton just kind of scrolling through the exercises. You do a great job of tinkering and putting really showing the exercises through the mind of a patient where they can do these exercises without you. You mentioned one of your superpowers is your ability to cue athletes properly. That probably came from years of experience, but how would you coach a new PT or even a PT that's getting into the sports realm to be an outstanding cuer, if that's a word?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it takes working with people and having to have solved issues, right? Like within your own body, for example, but also just like having worked with humans, like everyone's got different experiences with movement, but also just life experience, different like strengths and all that. So I think being able to recognize like know what a movement pattern should look like, know what should be going on. Like if you have like X-ray vision, or I guess not quite X-ray vision, but you can see like the muscles working, whatever.
Yep.
And then
X-ray
you can
vision.
recognize what's missing, right? And then find a way to like external cues. I'm sure your audience is familiar with like external versus internal cues. Like telling someone squeeze their butt would be an internal cue, and like most people don't know how to do that. That's the issue.
Yep.
But like having someone like drive their knees forward in a bridge or something like that, something that creates the movement without them thinking about like just the muscle that they're trying to do. Although I did actually recently make a post of like, if you just understand from like a clinician standpoint, if you understand where a muscle attaches, like literally just think about bringing those 2 points together. It's
Yeah.
that simple.
I think that's a great cue. I loved your post on the differentiating between sucking your abdominals in versus properly bracing your core. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but break that down because I think that's something that I struggled with mightily in my career when you're teaching core stability or contraction.
Yeah, I think a really common cue when people are trying to isolate the transverse abdominis is like pull belly button to spine, which like, I mean, I understand what they're going for, but I feel like oftentimes, more often than not, in my experience at least, the client is like sucks their belly button to their spine. I'm like, okay, well, how stable do you feel? Like, oh, your rib cage
Right.
is all flared up now. Perfect. Let's go squat. Sounds great. Like, no, absolutely not. Or like, oh, you're gonna sneeze. What's gonna happen then? So I think um personally, my cues that I like better for transverse abdominis are utilizing the breath. For example, like if you get someone to, get in a position where they're able to like focus on their abdominals, but then like get a full exhale. That's a really great way to get the abs engaged. And like you don't have to think about crunching. It just happens because you're trying to basically squeeze all the air out. But also thinking about the such a hard word to say, transverse
Yep.
abdominis.
Yep.
It's like it's a core, literally a corset. So, like thinking about that one point, your belly button, drawing it back to your spine doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I like the cue of like drawing the hip bones together. Or if you do, for example, we were talking about women's health earlier, if you do like a full Kegel, if someone is capable of doing that, that will often, it's neurologically linked with your transverse abdominis. So that's a good way to like cue like the lower transverse abdominis. But obviously you don't want to have to require a Kegel in order to connect with the transverse abdominis, but it's just a good way to like get someone like familiar with it. And from there you can refine it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I also love that you've given a number of options to the therapist to try to see what they can draw out of their patient. I think I had a very tough time in my graduate school. One of the things they always talked about in graduate school was having multiple tools in your tool belt. So you're doing a much better job. I wish you were my professor in explaining that. Like all
Thanks.
of these are tools to use, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll work for one patient and not for another, but you have to have the tools. And you hit on something awesome, which is you have to know what the move should look like. So whether that's a squat, like a barbell backloaded squat, you have to know what an outstanding rep looks like. So then you can deconstruct it and coach it together. And you have to have multiple options to give these cues, whether it be intrinsic or extrinsic, to get the outcome you're looking for. So I think there's a lot there that's awesome. I wanted to break this conversation down into two parts. One being business, business, and then the second one being clinical. So we just did a little bit of a deep dive into clinical. I want to pull you back to your business. Walk me through how you decided and why you decided to work for yourself.
Yeah, so before I even started school, I knew that I did not want to have anything to do with insurance, just because
Okay.
I feel like, in general, I think that at least in the physical therapy in the outpatient realm, a lot of the time, just because reimbursements keep getting cut and cut and cut, we are forced as the clinician to either see tons of patients, or the clinician, the PT does the evaluation, and the client's going to see their physical therapy assistant for the next 10 visits and then do their progress note or whatever. Which, there's a ton of amazing physical therapy assistants and I've worked with them, but like a client oftentimes wants to work with the same person that evaluated them. And that just makes sense. You don't want to have to explain to yourself what is going on, like back and forth between two different people. Or sometimes in like a more of a mill setting, you're just working with a tech, which I was a tech. I think I was a great tech, and techs are amazing. And it's a rite of passage if you're going to become a therapist a lot of the time, but they're not the doctor of physical therapy, right? They're not the person that evaluated you. So I just feel like, you either end up in that scenario where the client really just doesn't get the best care, and or the clinician ends up with like 50 notes to do on the weekend because they are actually working with their clients in person, but they have to see 50 patients a day in order to actually make a living. So and also, even all that said, like sometimes you'll get a big bill from your insurance, be like, oh, actually this wasn't covered, sorry. Oh, Evacor only allows 6 visits, so you must be better by now, even though this is post-op. Like, it just makes zero sense to me.
Zero.
And there's some scenarios when like using your insurance does make sense. For example, like say you are post-op and like you're going to need 6 weeks of manual therapy before you're even allowed to move your arm. Like it makes sense to like use your insurance for that, because I'm sure you already met your deductible with that surgery, first of all. And then also it's not like super like fine-tuned and skilled when you're doing, manual therapy is incredibly important, especially in that scenario, but it's not like you're going back to sport at that point, right? But I do feel a lot of the clients that I work with, either virtually or in person, are people that have, graduated from physical therapy, but their physical therapist doesn't work out themselves. So they couldn't like get them in the gym, like doing higher level stuff, because they don't do that stuff themselves. And they don't actually realize like what it is to actually overload someone. Like you can get someone back to, former,
sit
what is
to
the word we
stand.
use?
You can get someone to like activities of daily living. Prior level of function.
Prior level of exactly. But that's where they got injured. So unless they like got hit by a car, they probably had some mechanical issues, and we need to like increase their capacity. So, and that's the other thing too, is you don't have to stop training if you're injured. Like I work in a powerlifting gym now. The powerlifters don't want to stop training. They're like a special kind of crazy, and like very strong people. But like, you could do things to continue training while you're like modifying, if your shoulder's bothering you, for example, like you can modify range of motion, you can modify the variation, you can modify the load, you can modify volume, you can do so many different things to like just stop pissing that tissue off, so that you can address the things that are causing it to be a problem in the first place. But sometimes it's just like a volume thing. Sometimes they're just not sleeping. There's a multifaceted, there's so many things that affect an injury and affect a recovery and progress. And I feel like with insurance, you can't do that. You can't offer that to someone because you're going to burn out, as a clinician. So I wanted to be able to utilize my background in strength conditioning and bodybuilding and kettlebells and all this other stuff, so that I could actually just be something different. Like I didn't feel like those skills were going to be utilized in the insurance setting. Although the place that I was working, I actually really enjoyed a lot, and I miss that team a lot. Like I do miss working with other people sometimes, and we can talk about that with like the whole working for yourself thing. But I wouldn't change it for the world. And I never in a million years would have thought I'd be doing like the whole like online thing, but here we are.
COVID talk show. Yeah, there you are. Okay, so my number one fear, because I kind of faced the same challenge when I started my practice, is if you go cash, like if I'm going to see Dr. Meghan and I'm paying cash, how much does it cost to see you?
It's $160 per visit if they're doing like multiple visits.
Okay, so if I'm seeing you multiple times, I'm paying $160. I want to see Dr. Meghan. I'm not seeing anyone else. And then my question then was, how do I scale this then? So what's your vision and horizon for how you scale a cash practice? Hey guys, quick pause and a quick shout out to this new masterclass that we just launched here at True Sports Physical Therapy. Myself and Dr. Tim Stone put together a masterclass of ACL rehab, and we call it From Table to Turf. And the reason we call it that is because it's going to teach you exactly how to get your athlete all the way from post-op day one with the nitty-gritty of regaining all of that range of motion, with the tips and the tricks that we use here at True Sports Physical Therapy that gets our athletes better, faster, and stronger. And that's early. And then how do you progress that athlete all the way onto the field with a ball in their foot or a stick in their hands or whatever their sport is, and teach them how to accelerate, how to decel, how to change direction, and all the mechanics that go in there. What drills do we use to get our athletes exactly where they need to be back on the field and even better than before injury? And I want you to sign up for that class. Now, you can find it on our website. You can shoot us a direct message and just say, hey, send me the course. It's right now on sale, so make sure you sign up now. It is fully accredited to get you all of your continuing education hours. Sign up for the True Sports Masterclass ACL, From Table to Turf. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason that I was able to go off on my own initially this quickly was because I had that virtual, like I'm working virtually with people in more of the consultation, like strength and conditioning setting. So, as far as like in person, at this point, I don't plan on scaling it just because I don't need to. And I like the freedom that I'm going to have to like raise my own kids and work from anywhere and like all that kind of stuff. But I would say it's really important to have a business coach, first of all, and I do have one. His name is Ray Gorman. You should also have him on if you have not heard of him. We
I'll
can
add
talk
him to the
about that.
list.
We can talk about that later. Yes, he was absolutely like pivotal in me being able to like feeling that I actually could do this and go off on my own. Like he gave me those skills because let's be real, in PT school we don't learn anything about business whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Or
learn
sports
a little
PT.
bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah, we don't really learn how to, especially to be like an entrepreneur, right? We learn,
Yeah.
other stuff for sure.
Well, I will say, let me cut you off for a second, Dr. Megan,
Yeah.
because the business education that I got in graduate school, we had to submit a mock business plan, and my business plan was the practice that I work in now, 10 years later, with 50 PTs and 14 locations. And I said, okay, this is where I kind of want to go with it. And I got a C on that paper. So they tried to teach me.
Yeah.
But I should have gotten a C on that. But anyway, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, you didn't get much business lessons there in graduate school, and neither did I. So you found a business coach. What else was imperative to starting your own practice?
Having relationships with people, like
Okay.
feeling like, I mean, and again, like I said, Instagram expedited that for me on like a bigger scale, but like everywhere I go, every gym I join, I don't I'm like that person that like doesn't like to talk to people at the gym because I'm usually pretty focused, but I always end up doing it anyway. Like I meet people, and people talk to you about their injuries or their daughter's injuries or their wife, or like, oh, I'm trying to get my wife into strength training, but she's scared and she always gets injured, blah, blah, blah. So I think definitely having relationships within your community, especially if you want to have like an in-person cash practice, is so important. And then also either having a niche or having something about yourself that people are drawn to specifically to you, because PTs are a dime a dozen, and
Yep.
definitely not every PT could do their own practice, let alone a cash practice, just because they don't do anything different than most PTs. So I think having a niche and having just I don't want to say a following, but just a group of people that recognize you for what you have to offer specifically.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to have a Rolodex and to have a network that
Mhm.
you can come back to and tap into. And it also lends some street cred to say, like, hey, Dr. Megan is different. I want to pay cash to see her. Where'd you come up with $160?
Um, well, basically, when I was working with my coach, Ray, he told me to choose a number that made me borderline uncomfortable because I am the person that would be like, oh, let me do all these things for you, but oh no, you don't have to pay me. It's okay. I'll just do it for free. Like that's
Yep.
me, which is terrible. I know. I'm great at selling myself on accident, but when it comes to like asking people to pay me, I'm absolutely awful at it. So that was the number that we came up with. So the actual evaluation, and again, this is like if it's you're just doing an evaluation, which is never what happens, right? You usually have a plan of care. It's 249, and then 199 if you're just doing like per session for like follow-up visit, and then the
Mhm.
160 is just like a discounted rate. So usually what I tell people is 160 because they're not usually just buying one visit.
Yep.
Um, so that's and just looking at the like the area that you live in is really important, like what people are willing to pay, and then also what the cash rate at the clinic that I used to work at. So for 45 minutes the cash rate was like one it was like 140 or something like that, which that's cash rate, but you're not getting cash care. You're in
Yep.
a normal insurance-based physical therapy clinic, but if you choose to pay cash because you don't want to even bother with your insurance, you're paying like 140 for 45 minutes. I feel like, my visits are an hour, give or take, but if we need to take more than that, that's fine because I don't have like back-to-back clients and, we can spend the time that we need to, and we can communicate outside of work and, or, the clinic and all that stuff too. And then a lot of the time when I work with someone in person, I don't see them that often. I see them as often as we need to. And then I sometimes will, instead of like an HEP, we have what's called a prescriptive exercise program, which is essentially like an HEP, but you're like, I take over like all of their training and incorporate their rehab into it. So I'm their strength
Awesome.
coach in addition to working with them one-on-one if necessary. And again, like I said, not everyone needs that like hands-on care or that like live in
Programming.
person
Yeah.
cueing and programming exactly. And a lot of time up front they do, but sometimes I have a lot of repeat customers because people, they just, athletes in the area, they wanted to work with me on one specific thing. And then they, that got better, but then something else starts bothering them. Like I just saw a girl on Sunday and we fixed her in like 5 minutes. And then we just ended up like tinkering around the rest of the time. It was kind of cool actually, but
That's
yeah.
awesome. Okay, so how did you overcome that? How did you overcome your fear for asking for payment or remuneration? Like, I think that's a huge obstacle for a lot of PTs. And by the way,
Yeah.
chiros are awesome at that. PTs
Yeah.
suck at that. So how do
Hmm.
you overcome it?
Yeah. Well, to be totally honest, I still struggle. But
Okay.
it helps to get burned because it makes you like more frustrated with like wasting your time, right? But I will say, like, when it comes to my like programming, like virtually when I'm working with people, I have a lot easier time charging when I charge for that because I've been doing it for a really long time and I've gotten repeated results. Like, it is really hard as a new grad who also just started her own cash practice to
Yeah.
decide arbitrarily that she wants to charge a certain amount of money, even though I recognize like I'm good at what I do, but I'm still like a new grad PT. Like that's just the reality of it, right?
Yep.
So I think that for just advice for people that are listening, if you're worried about charging something, charge borderline what you're uncomfortable with.
Love it.
Obviously, be realistic with where you live and like who
Yep.
your clientele are, because also it's like at the end of the day, do we want to help people or do we want to just like have like as high of rates as possible? You have to decide, like, do you want to see more volume? Do you want to see less volume? Because that's going to determine what you charge. But that way, you have the flexibility to like offer discounts for things if you want to, or you don't feel like you're going to start to feel resentful if you feel like your time is being wasted, right? And
Yeah.
also, like, when I go seek a provider out, like I am fine paying like a premium fee because I know the care I'm going to get is going to be premium, you know?
Yep. Yep.
So you have to think about it that way. You don't want to be affordable for everyone because then everyone can come in and see you.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
I
think
also
I
think
think
that
it's also well, I'm sorry. I was
yeah,
going to
no,
say
you're good.
I think it's also so imperative that you have this thought through prior. So you're at 249, 199 or 160. So when that patient says to you, "How much is this going to cost?" You're
Mhm,
not running through calculations in your head. You have
mhm.
practiced your pitch, like and you can remove yourself emotionally to just
Yeah,
spit out the line to say it's
yeah,
249. It's
yeah,
249. It's not
yeah,
well, what can you afford? Or how do you
right.
feel about it's here's the Meghan script. It's 249 for your evaluation. I think there's a lot of wisdom there.
Yeah, thank you. What was I going to say? Oh, the other thing I was going to say is I think one of the biggest things that we need to overcome just in the PT world, I think we have a lot more PTs that could just go out and start their own practices, is if the population at large, like our clients, understood what good PT looks like and what bad PT looks like. And also just like if they realize like, oh, how much do I spend on Starbucks every month? Or like, oh, what do I spend on my eyelashes or my hair or my nails? Like literally there's so many things that we just throw money at that, you know, are worth it to us, and it's self-care. Like I'm all about self-care, but like you have to think about PT as that being that as well. And like you might as well, in my opinion, you might as well not go to PT at all if you're going to see a PT that's like in a mill. Like it's probably a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah,
And I'll say that it's a bold statement, but
I think that's totally true. And I think, you know, I just had a patient come to me with his kid, and I said, okay, here's how much it costs to come to True Sports. And he said, well, you know, they didn't charge me that at the hospital setting I was at. I said, they don't rehab athletes. So it is what it is. Like you could go to the standard mill setting or hospital setting or whatever, but you're not going to be surrounded by med balls. You're not going to be surrounded by other athletes. You're not going to be in an environment where you can run, jump, throw. And maybe that's okay. And I think as the clinician, we have to be okay saying it might not be for everyone, but it will be for the people that see the value and take it seriously. And a postscript to that is that patient went back to their hospital setting and then came back to me 2 weeks later and said, dude, this is worth it. Like that was a mess over there. So you have to be comfortable. So we talked about some of the fears or some of the obstacles to setting up your own shop. What were you surprised that was actually easier than you thought when you opened your own spot?
Patient care.
What, that you're just like, hey, I am a good PT.
Yeah, like actually helping people. That was the easy part. And I think it's totally normal. I think if you don't have imposter syndrome for like the rest of your life, you're probably not growing or you're probably not open to growing. Like I don't like to feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but like I don't want to ever feel like complacent, like I know everything. Like I want to have struggles because I think it forces you to critically think. It forces you to, you know, talk to other resources, other PTs, and like run things by them. Because sometimes, you know, we get so like myopic, like thinking something is something else. And then someone's like, why did you test this? I'm like, oh my God, no, I didn't. Like, how did I not do that? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, the patient care and like, I mean, just interacting with people, making people feel like they're going to be okay. That is like my favorite thing ever. So I think educating patients, that's probably the part that I like the most, because you can just put someone back into the world with less fear and like more understanding of their body. Because when we don't understand something, that's where it's like most terrifying, right? Like, oh my God, is this the end of my powerlifting career? You know, like people literally think that. I'm like, no, we just need to like move in the frontal plane.
Right. Just make like, a small change will go a really long way. I know that was when I came out of school, I was obsessed with the manual therapy world. And you're talking about joint manipulation and mobilization and PIVMs and PAVMs and all that. I'm like, oh my God, I can't feel this. I can't feel the SI joint. What am I going to do? And then I took a really high level manual course. And this woman who had 30 years experience in the back of the room raised her hand and asked the question. And I said to myself, like, that was the dumbest question I've ever heard. Like, that was so dumb. Was she not paying attention? And then the professor who's leading the course said, that was a really dumb question. Like, why would you ask that question? And sitting there, I was a new grad, and I realized there are a lot of bad PTs. There are a lot of poor PTs out there that just don't have the passion or don't care enough to do the extra legwork. And I think that's when my imposter syndrome kind of went away, where it's like, we do have the skill. Like if you care enough, and now the information is so available, like just hop on Meghan's Instagram and you'll find so much valuable information that you can really, if you can internalize that and be humble enough to say, hey, I don't know everything, you're going to be so far ahead of the people who maybe have been doing this for decades. What do you think the best advice to someone thinking about starting their own practice is?
Yeah. Well, before I say that, I'm just going to say also, like, it's okay to not be good at everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's good to have things that you're really good at and then things that you're not so good at, because I think in order to be you can't just be really good at everything. But advice for someone who wants to start their own practice, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think just deciding that you can do it, that's the first step. And just what I would say is, there's two options. You can either just jump and have to sink or swim, or you can like start to like dabble in the side, which is what I did. And that was initially I was dabbling without even realizing that it was setting me up for the future. But the biggest thing for me to help me gain the confidence and realize like, okay, all the holes of things that I don't understand how to do, like literally like get a PLLC and get all my other stuff set up, all the back end stuff, all the like the just daily tasks that I need to do in order to like be able to sustain this, was getting a coach. And that was Ray. So that's what I would definitely recommend. There's a lot of, especially if you want to do cash PT, there's a lot of different like coaches out there, but obviously I'm a little biased to mine. But Ray
Yeah.
specifically works with people who want to either have in-person cash, hybrid cash, which is what I'm doing, or completely virtual. And it's not, he doesn't just work with PTs, he works with like chiropractors and personal trainers as well.
Yeah, yeah. We've had Danny Mattei on our
Yeah,
pod, and he was awesome. He's another
yeah,
coach, Matta. So shout out to him. But I think that's really good advice. I didn't go that route. I kind of built my own team separately, and that was advice that I got from a PT that lives heavily in the insurance world. He said,
yeah.
you have to have your team. You got to put your team together. You got to have your accountant. You got to have your attorney. Just so to do the LLC crap, right? To do the stuff that we might not know about. Your time is better spent generating revenue, treating patients, helping them, not waiting online or on a call trying to get your LLC. So I think that
Yes.
that's really gold. Talk to me about marketing. How the
Yeah.
hell did you get 6 figures in followers?
Yeah. So I do my own marketing for now.
Okay.
I
Yep.
am also a type A person, so I like to control things, and I feel like I could have someone else make my content for me, but it wouldn't be the same. Like it's just not the same. So basically my Instagram used to be like, I used to compete in the bikini division of bodybuilding. So it used to be just like selfies, prep rants, like maybe I'd share a workout or two or whatever. And then in 2020, during the pandemic, I started like recording more workouts and sharing them, just because everybody was stuck in their houses. Why not just share the love? And my husband's a
Yep.
physical therapist, and so I had access to his clinic, which had like a full gym with like turf and everything. So it was nice. I could just film a bunch of stuff, and then started mostly filming so that I could fill an exercise library, but then also was like double posting on Instagram. One thing that helped me like start to build my following was when I did Empowered Performance, which is Katie's program. Because there's like 40 people that do that each cohort, and then those people are all personal trainers or physical therapists, chiros. They all have clients. So if you follow all of them, they follow you. Everybody's posting each other, and you're just kind of like got this like 6 degrees of separation type thing. So that
That's
was
good
kind of how I
advice.
started to grow. And then I was consistent with posting. Like I tried to post things that were valuable. Like I stopped posting a lot of just like workouts, and I started posting more like education, like just things that either I struggled with or that client struggled with, or I was learning in PT school, like things that I wanted to just honestly, I used it to study in PT school. Like it helped me articulate what I was learning.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, so that was during school, and I think I hit 10,000 followers when I was in school the first year. And then like just again, it was like slowly building, and then you just meet other coaches, stuff like that. If someone is trying to grow their account, I would highly recommend like collaborating with other people. Obviously, you want it to be genuine, but like I've collaborated with several other coaches recently who either had bigger followings than me or smaller followings than me, just to sort of like cross post and like get more exposure, because there's so many great coaches out there who have like no followers.
Yep.
So and having a large following also doesn't mean a lot. Like people are like, oh my god, it's so cool to meet you, and I'm like, oh, I'm like literally a normal person. Like
Yeah.
it's so weird, honestly. But I'm like that with like Doc Jen Fit, because she's like just like the OG Instagram physical therapist. So I get it. Like I'm starstruck by her, and I'm sure she's a totally normal person.
Yeah.
But
Well, I had that with
yeah,
one of my first guests on the pod like a year
yeah,
ago when I started this thing was Kelly Starrett, and I almost passed
yeah,
out when he
yeah, yes,
he popped up on my screen. I'm like, I think I have some questions. Turns out
Yeah.
You know, he's a coffee geek. He's obviously a CrossFitter. He's just like the most normal dude ever.
Hmm.
But I never
Yeah.
don't get starstruck when Kelly Starrett
Yeah.
calls me.
Yeah. Well, I think those people like Jen and Kelly, they're both like people that are not physical therapists know who they are,
Yep.
like because they've created something that is accessible to the layperson, not just people who have like that education. But essentially, like I started building things slowly, and then I was at like probably, I mean, I just had a couple of posts that went viral, and then got like 30,000 followers in like a month. And then I was getting 10 inquiries a day to work with me for like a month straight, which is when I was like, I should probably like do
Probably
something with this.
monetize this.
Like
Yes.
maybe I should like stop working for someone else, because this just seems like, is this going to last forever? So that was when I decided to work with Ray, and he was like, yeah, you should like leave your job. And I was like, I can't do it. I'm too scared. So I like ripped off the Band-Aid slow, which I'm very glad that I did, because like I said, I loved the place that I was working and all the people I was with. And I'm glad I didn't just like peace out and leave. I left on very good terms, and they send me clients, I send them clients, because like when I get a person with Medicare that wants to work with me, I'm like, I don't want to deal with that headache. So
Yeah.
here you go to these people. They're great. So yeah, I would say like if you're trying to grow your social media following, just be diligent, be helpful, like communicate, like talk to people in your DMs. When people reach out to you, like talk to them, communicate
Yeah.
with those humans. And also don't get discouraged when things flop, because I have posts that I'm like, this is so great, and then all of a sudden like no one sees it. I'm like, okay, well, this sucks. You just got to
Yep.
keep going.
Yep.
And then it doesn't really matter how many followers you have. You want loyal followers. You want
Yeah.
followers that care about what you have to say, because like just because they're there, it doesn't mean that they're interacting with you, or that like they're going to give you money in any way, or that you're going to be able to help them. Because some people have some people pay for followers, and I've gotten
Yep.
so many inquiries. I'm sure you do too. Like, hey, do you want to grow your following? I'm like, yeah, I do, organically. You can't help me. Bye.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just crazy. It's crazy what people will do
For followers.
to get followers, and it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Like, I mean, it does. You have like a bigger pool of people for potential clients, but like, it doesn't matter as much as people think. And also, people are mean. Like when you get more followers, they're like, I don't know if they're real humans or if they're bots or if they're just jerks that sit on their computer and go on the Discover page and just like comment rude things. But you have to have thick skin, because people will say things that are just not cool, So that's something that comes with having a bigger following for sure. And I know I'm not nearly as like I'm not as spicy as like people like Susie Spurlock, Susie Squats. She gets like a lot of hate on her posts sometimes, because she is like, I'm more like mellow.
Yeah.
Whereas she'll like fight with people, and I'm like, you know what? My nervous
Not
system
worth
cannot
it.
handle this. No, it's
I
not worth
don't blame you.
it.
It's not worth it. And I
Yeah.
think the number one thing I took away from how to market is all PT should be bikini competitors. I feel like that. Yes. All of
People
us.
definitely take you seriously when you do that. So,
Yes.
no.
I can totally see like my following decreasing as we're having this conversation.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that having that background, like honestly, bodybuilding made me way better at queuing.
Yeah, and I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that
Yeah.
that's totally imperative. Like I always say, like
Yeah.
no one wants an out of shape physical therapist. So
Yeah.
get yourself in shape. I always take offense to when people ask me, "Do you work out?" Yes, your therapist should work out.
Yes.
So how important that
Absolutely
is.
should.
Okay, so let's get a little bit clinical, if that's all of our business conversation. I love some of the exercise you post online, as I mentioned. Where do you get the ideas for your exercise? True Sports Physical Therapy is growing like wildfire. We have 14 locations, soon to be more. We are throughout the state of Maryland. We're in Pennsylvania, in Lebanon and York, Pennsylvania, as well as in Delaware, in Newark and Wilmington, Delaware. Like I said, so many more practices to come, and we always need outstanding sports physical therapists. Our treatment style is unique. We are one-on-one with your athlete for 45 minutes every single session. You do the entire treatment, you do the entire evaluation, and they are in state-of-the-art facilities where you have room to run, throw, and jump, and really get your athlete all the way back to on the field and better and stronger than they were. We also have outstanding salaries, comp structures, bonus abilities, 401ks, as well as a very strong continuing education offering, including in-house continuing education. And we're looking for you. Now is the time, as we are growing like crazy. Just shoot your resume over to Yoni, YONI, at True Sports PT, or shoot us a DM and we will hit you back. We will get you in for our unique, tried and true interview process and really make a determination that this is the right place for you to grow your career and get your athletes better than ever. We can't wait to hear from you.
So some things honestly, some things I learned from other coaches, some things I see someone else do, I'm like, oh, I can make that better. We're going to change this. Other things I'm just like, I wonder what this would feel like, or like, how can I get this person who struggles with this to do this better and like have to like, just again, exercises can be the best cues. And like, I don't know if have you ever taken a DNS course?
No.
Dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. So it's just another course, but basically it's a lot of baby developmental patterns. Essentially, you start from like they're each called like whatever month they're usually at. We learned like developmental positions and patterns in PT school, but it's very similar to that. And it was kind of cool when I learned that in PT school because I had actually done DNS courses as an athletic trainer because I worked for a chiropractor and like they're big on DNS. But yeah, so that's a lot of my inspiration comes from just DNS is like using the floor for cues and like, like the Turkish get up, which I think we'll talk about later, just using that to like help you cue scapular protraction and stuff like that. So I really like ground-based stuff. I really like using bands for things. I like things that just help cue just like patterns that resemble human movement, like walking, crawling, all that kind of stuff. Honestly, it's just a conglomeration of things. I wish I had a more finite answer.
No, but I think the one thing I heard you say there was, I'm just tinkering, and it's clear that you're in the gym kind of working on yourself, and from that comes your inspiration and knowledge. And I think that's so important to just get yourself in the gym, start moving, and then whether it be keeping a notepad or keeping like a running list of things you want to hit for posting or implementation and therapeutic exercise with your patient, I think that goes a long way. When you teach a Turkish get-up, because it's one of my favorite exercises to teach, where do you start? It's so complex. What's your first move with a patient that's never done a Turkish get-up?
Yeah, sometimes I start with a baby get-up or like literally just the first step. Other times I will start with an arm bar because I think like a kettlebell arm bar, audience, if they know what that is, but essentially just because understanding how to centrate your glenohumeral joint is completely like just foundational to Turkish get up because you have to be able to do that while you do all these other things and like maintain it. So yeah, I usually will start with either an arm bar, kind of depends on what someone needs or what I'm using the Turkish get up for. And then, or like a baby get up or just starting with the first step. Like when I learned Turkish get ups, I did Strong First, their kettlebell certification, and they are very like super like just Russian and rigid about things. And they like break it into like steps. So like every movement is like step, pause, like check all your balances, like make sure everything's in the right position and then move on and then check again and then move on, and so it's very just precise. I think a lot of the time people just kind of like go through the motions and just essentially they're just standing up with a kettlebell overhead. But there's like no finesse. They're literally getting nothing out of it, which is why I think a lot of people think they're useless exercises. Because that's either all they see or like all they're doing when they're doing it. They're just like doing it because it kind of looks cool. But you can tell when someone has like properly learned it or has used it in rehab even. But I'll use components of it for rehab all the time, like especially for like clients patients with shoulder problems. Sorry. So sorry. But essentially just because like the shoulder that is holding the kettlebell, that shoulder has to be very stable. And then also the shoulder that's like bringing you up off the ground, that one has to be really stable. And that's something that a lot of people will often miss.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I've and sometimes it's hard in some of the powerlifting gyms, but I love setting up and I'll do it with them and I'll break it down usually into two components, up to half kneel and then from half kneel standing back down. But I'll do it in front of a mirror is what I was going to say, and have them see themselves. But I really want to make sure I break it down because if you show them that whole move, there are just too many things to hit. Another thing that I got from Strong First was making them earn the weight. So you have to do a Turkish get up first with my shoe balancing on your fist before
Yes.
you can earn the right to do it with a weight. And when you use the word centrate, that's what I think of, is their ability to keep humerus flush inside of glenoid and centered inside of glenoid. That is proven to happen when you're balancing something like a shoe that weighs nothing, but you have no choice but to keep it stationary. Any other tips that you would say to the audience? You got to hit this when introducing the get up.
Yeah, shoe. I use a shoe. I'll use a slider. I'll use a cup sometimes, or do a bottoms up kettlebell.
Okay.
But also, yes, I totally agree. Like, you need to earn the weight, but also I think sometimes having weight is a cue itself, because now there's a risk of you dropping this weight on your head.
Yeah, love that.
You
Love
know?
that.
Yeah. So like when I do like a really heavy get up, like even though it's very heavy, like I am so locked in and focused on it because I don't want to drop it on my face. That can be really helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think just kind of like layering on the steps. So like I love breaking it into 2 steps. That seems like a lot less overwhelming when you like introduce it to someone. But I like being able to like go up onto your elbow and then go all the way back down, and then go up onto your hand and then go all the way back down, and then go, and like you just kind of like add on a layer. It's kind of like one of those like alphabet games where you like add a different name of the alphabet.
Yep.
So I mean, and that's a lot of the time too. I won't cover the whole Turkish get up in one session. I will introduce it and like do a couple of steps, and then we'll just like let it sit and like simmer in their brain for a few days, and then we'll come back to it, because a lot of time you'll learn when you're not doing it right. Even just doing mental reps can be really useful.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
I
and then
think
also,
that's great. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and with any movement, I mean, Turkish get up, squat, deadlift, pulls, anything like that, like, you know, you don't want to just, with Turkish get up, it's a little different because it's so many steps, but you want to see like, okay, do a squat. Like, what are we working with here? Like, what does it look like? How much of a disaster is it? Or like, do you just need a couple of like finessings, you know, because finessings, is that a word? It's a word
Yeah,
now.
it is now. I like it.
Yeah. I have a friend who he like learned Turkish get ups just from like kind of hearing what they were. And like, we worked on his get up because he already like had the base, but like he was doing a lot of things without really realizing what they were for and like how they could be better. And so that, in that situation, I just like had him do it, and then I was like, okay, we're going to just address like these little things, and then he was like, oh my god, that feels so different. So that's something else too. I think sometimes we don't give people credit for like having some sort of baseline understanding.
Yeah. Is there a population you don't think about using the get up for? Like, nah, this isn't right for them.
No.
Okay.
I think everyone could benefit from it for something.
Yeah, I think that's
honestly.
great. What pathologies is that your go-to?
Shoulder stuff. Shoulder and like anything shoulder, I would say, or anyone that has like, I mean, a lot of the time shoulder issues will arise from like not being able to move their thoracic spine properly, or just, you know, anyone who has issues with pressure management or just awareness of their core in different positions. So like back pain, things like that, I would say, but definitely shoulder, I would say.
I like that term, pressure management. Because I think a get up can go a long way. I love it in my pitchers, like you said, for shoulder and elbow stuff, right? Like their ability to stabilize trunk and let the arm work around it instead of vice versa.
Yeah.
I think the get up is an outstanding use. I wish it got more play in the baseball world. It just doesn't enough. I mean, there are definitely guys like Cressy who incorporate it, but I think it could get far more use than it currently does in the baseball population. What about lower body?
I mean, I was working with someone this last weekend who was she's a firefighter, and she was having some like knee, I think it was quad tightness, so her like patella was hurting when she was kneeling on it. But anyone who's got like issues getting up and off the floor, older individuals, for example, or people who are like post-op, maybe they're struggling with like lunges or things like that, like being able to do an overhead lunge, I mean, that's super valuable. And being able to get up and down off the floor is something that I think people should try to maintain their entire life, because once you lose it, it's really hard to regain it.
Yeah. And then what allows you to build up to a Turkish get up? Say someone's post-op shoulder, they don't have the range yet. How do you begin to think through, you know, in 4 weeks and 6 weeks, you're going to be able to do a Turkish get up? What are the check marks or the boxes, I guess, you have to check in order to prepare someone to do the Turkish get up?
Yeah, so thinking about like the bottom shoulder, I would say being able to do like variations of a side plank or like
Yep.
a DNS like star plank. That is really important. And being able to do like get into like a bear position. And then for the upper shoulder, my one of my favorite things to work on to do for people that, normal like, wall slides, we've all done those. I like to use like a landmine. So like either in standing, which is obviously the easiest because it's the least weighted, like pressing it up and then walking yourself towards it so that you're going into shoulder flexion as much as you can tolerate while thinking about that like scapular upward rotation, protraction, which again is like easier said than done. But
Sure.
sometimes having that like external cue, like the wall or like having a landmine that's sort of like engaging your shoulder, helping you engage your shoulder muscles as you go overhead can be really helpful. And then just progressing into like more of like a half kneeling position and then working through it like that. And then slowly going into overhead. Getting into like having a kettlebell overhead is a little bit easier than, I don't know why I keep raising my arms if this is even going to be
That's
on
right.
video.
It will.
Uh,
It is. It will be on video.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's seeing me just raise my arms. So getting a kettlebell overhead is a little bit easier to like fake shoulder flexion than a dumbbell because with a dumbbell, you actually have to have your arm vertical. With a kettlebell, the weight's on the back of your arm, so you can have a little bit less than full shoulder flexion and still be okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, then armbar, like I said, I would start if someone has like a fear or instability, starting with like a kettlebell armbar, which essentially is the same thing as being able to do a side plank. You're
Yep.
just your arm has the kettlebell on it or your elbow is on the ground. They're the same idea of that like shoulder joint centration.
Yeah, I love your idea of using a landmine there because you also want to think about the different levers you're pulling and you're taking
Mhm.
away the lever of stability to some degree, right? You're giving them some stability by the fact that that landmine is attached to the ground or attached to the post, so they don't have to control as much. So I think
Mhm.
that's a great let's call it like ladder to climb for them to be able to
Mhm.
do that, and then you take it away and make it a truly open kinetic chain movement by putting the weight in their hands. So that is awesome. Thanks for walking us through that. I think
Mhm.
there's a huge amount of gold there for people to pick through. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you for your time. This has been eye-opening. Tell us how we can find you and who you want to hear from, and then also tell us about just a little bit more about that team form and function.
Yeah. Okay. So the best way to contact me would be on Instagram. So at Dr. Megzy DPT, at dr.megzy.dpt.
There you go.
And then, so as far as like who I love to work with is anyone who wants to just have a sustainable strength training practice. I personally love working with, I love working with everyone, but I have a special spot in my heart for women in like the peripartum area because I think it's an underserved population and I don't think there's a lot of pelvic health education out there, and when there is, they're not necessarily tying it in with higher level strength training and things like that. So those are the populations that I personally love to work with. And then as far as form and function, so essentially currently we are doing an upper lower and then full body split, but it is a full strength and conditioning program with anything you see on my Instagram. Like if you like my page, you would love my programming. It's like my page, but with a lot more like full, just cohesive things. It's not
Yeah.
just sprinkled about. But we do, the normal main squat, bench, all that kind of stuff. And then we're also implementing a lot more like athletic movements, power movements, plyometrics, uh, uh, multiplanar. That was what I was looking
Yeah.
for. I mean, it's really just my style of training. But the reason why I've grown to love this program so much is because it allows me to work with people that aren't necessarily like you're not struggling with an injury or anything like that. You just want to have solid programming that has you have access to a coach, you have access to a team that has like a like-minded goal as you do. So I wish I would have started the subscription earlier because it's been really cool just to see people just getting to move better. And it's great too because I don't have contact with everybody all the time, but there's people have questions in the chat or they want to get a form check or things like that. Like I am more than happy to help them with those things and help them move better and be more confident in the gym.
That's really cool. One of the things you mentioned, which I loved, was your ability to communicate with other people doing the programming. So it creates this community around your programming. I think that's a really awesome feature for anyone looking for that sense of community. So all great things. I'm excited to see where you take it. I think you shared
Thank
so
you.
much knowledge here. Meg, I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom. And I wish you so much success in the future. Really appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, guys. Enjoy. Thank you so much for listening to the True Sports Physical Therapy podcast. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, wherever it is you consume your pods. We are there. Please give us a listen, share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, leave us a 5-star review. And as always, give us a follow on Instagram, on TikTok, where we are posting constantly daily content on how to be an outstanding sports physical therapist. We appreciate you guys. We can't wait to hear from you.